not all women have a 28-day cycle. A lot of women do, and a lot of women do ovulate on cycle day 14. But even if a woman does, you would see from cycle to cycle, you're not always ovulating the same time every single day, every single cycle. And even if you do have a 28-day cycle, sometimes that will vary. Maybe it'll be 27 days, maybe 29 days. 1 month it will be 30 days. So we are not robots. And because we're not robots, we are cyclical beings. And as a cyclical being, as a woman, our body is always responding to the environment around us. And we all have seasons and phases in our life. Whether it's you're going through a really busy season or phase with work, whether you're traveling, whether you are, moving through some issues with your partner or familial things. This is everything in life is going to create an environment around you that is going to impact the menstrual cycle.
Getting pregnant and giving birth are two of the most exciting things you can ever hope to experience in this life. The moment you think you could be pregnant, you're frantically searching for all the best information, which is why you're here today. I'm Stephanie King, and with my many years of experience as a professional childbirth educator, doula, and lover of all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, I'm here to make preparing for your birth enjoyable, empowering, and totally easy. Each week, I'll cover different topics, interview professionals, and get into the nitty-gritty birth stories from mamas just like you. And when you're ready for more, you can join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I take you step by step through exactly how to prepare your mind, body, spirit, and partner for a birth you love. So let's get started. All right. If you guys are pregnant right now, which can be the case for many of you, of my pregnant mamas who are listening, then it might seem your cycle is in a far distant past, which is the best feeling in the world. But your cycle has a lot to do with how you are going to recover postpartum, and particularly how you are going to get pregnant again if you choose to have more children. So I have with me today Nora DeBora, and she is a functional fertility coach, a holistic nutritionist, and fertility awareness practitioner. And she's the host of the Ultimate Pregnancy Prep podcast, who helps women and couples prepare for pregnancy and have a healthy baby. So with that, Nora, will you say hello to everybody? Tell us a little bit about you and kind of how you got into the passion that you have for this work.
Absolutely. Well, first off, thank you, Steph, for having me on the show. I'm always love collaborating with like-minded people to just spread and share the knowledge as far and wide as we possibly can about women's health and all the things related to fertility and pregnancy and postpartum, I guess. So thank you for having me on the show. Yeah, so a little bit about me. I have been in the fertility space in this niche for the last 6 years, but I've been in health and wellness for about 12 years now. I started off as a holistic nutritionist, personal trainer, and yoga instructor. And I did that for about 5 years and then was kind of just getting a little bit bored I was just getting a little bored. And by this time, I was in my mid-30s, and I was just noticing that a lot of the people around me were struggling to conceive. And so I decided to just do a little bit more digging in the fertility space. And from there, I realized how huge of a gap there was in just in medicine, especially when it comes to conventional medicine, with regards to really empowering and teaching women how to become body literate and really understand their body through the lens of the menstrual cycle. Because really, at the end of the day, fertility is an extension of your health. So if you're up to snuff on your health and your health is doing well, and as we know, your menstrual cycle is essentially your monthly report card. All of these factors go together, which pretty much can help women overall improve their health, help them advocate for themselves, help them improve their fertility, and at the end of the day, help them get and stay pregnant.
Yeah. I love that that's your background, actually, that like holistic nutrition and all this, which I feel like flows so perfectly into what we're going to talk about today. And I'm with you. I think we are seeing fertility concerns, issues getting pregnant through the roof right now. And I think it's just going to keep going. And so I want to hear from you today. I want to talk about kind of the why behind that. But I have my suspicions, and that has to do with the overprocessed food that we're eating and our lifestyle and just the craziness that is the world around us right now. I think and medication and just everything that we're adding to the list of things that are probably creating not the best environment for our bodies to be able to get and stay pregnant like you're talking about. So you deal with particularly particularly the menstrual cycle, which is what I wanted to dive into today. I know that you deal with a lot more than that, but let's talk about that. So you said it's kind of your monthly report card. Will you kind of walk us through the phases of the menstrual cycle and what women can expect as they go? And I would love for you, if you could, as you're going through the phases, to talk about signs and symptoms as well, so that because we don't all have a 28-day cycle where we all ovulate on day 14, right? I talk about this all the time when it comes to induction and all this stuff. So tell us a little bit about the symptoms too, because women's bodies are going to be a little bit different too.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just start with what you started with just not all women have a 28-day cycle. A lot of women do, and a lot of women do ovulate on cycle day 14. But even if a woman does, you would see from cycle to cycle, you're not always ovulating the same time every single day, every single cycle. And even if you do have a 28-day cycle, sometimes that will vary. Maybe it'll be 27 days, maybe 29 days. 1 month will be 30 days. So we are not robots. And because we're not robots, we are cyclical beings. And as a cyclical being, as a woman, our body is always responding to the environment around us. And we all have seasons and phases in our life. You know, whether it's you're going through a really busy season or phase with work, whether you're traveling, whether you are, moving through some issues with your partner or familial things. This is everything in life is going to create an environment around you that is going to impact the menstrual cycle. So that's number one. Remember, your body is not broken if you're seeing one month you ovulated cycle day 14, the next month you ovulated cycle day 18. It doesn't mean you're broken. It just means something's up in the environment, which is impacting the cycle. So with that said, let's kind of start with what on average or just what generally the cycle looks like. I don't think, at least I was not taught this in school when I was a young girl. This is all something that I learned later in my life. And when I did learn about this, I was so excited and was like, how did most women not know this? So that's when I started the podcast and wanted to scream this all from the rooftops. So I'm really excited to be sharing this with today. So let's start with cycle day 1. Cycle day 1 is the day that you bleed, the day you get your period. And this is going to mark the beginning of your menses, right? Of your period. And so if we kind of pull back for a moment and we look at the cycle in its entirety, I know we said there's 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, and usually we think about this as 4 weeks, right? Week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. But I actually want to pull back and look at it as 2 phases. There's 2 phases of the menstrual cycle, with the dividing point being ovulation. Now, prior to ovulation, we have the follicular phase. And the follicular phase really encompasses the first week of your menses, so however many days your period is, and then the week after your period leading up to ovulation. So in your menses, I think most of us know how it feels to have our period. Our hormones are all relatively flat, especially estrogen. And this is the time where our body is shedding the uterine lining. And so a lot of us feel tired, fatigued, more introverted. We want to stay close to home. We don't want to go out and do lots of social plans with our friends. And so it's really important to honor our body during this time. Now, different signs and symptoms that some women may experience that may be normal for them or may be common but aren't necessarily normal would be really clotty, heavy flows. And so if somebody has a menstrual cycle where you are soaking through, more than 5-6 super tampons every day, this is going to be a sign that your period is actually too heavy. So we can have heavy, clotty flows that last, up to 7 days or longer. And this is a sign that something might be up. There's also goes the other way. Some women have very scanty and light flows. So what does this indicate? This can indicate, usually it kind of pulls into the estrogen picture. So if we think about the uterine lining and it building up for release and shedding in the menstrual cycle, what builds the uterine lining in the follicular phase? It's estrogen. And so estrogen is going to build that uterine lining. So if we don't, and then progesterone thickens it in the luteal phase. So if we have a really short, scanty flow, a lot of the times this can indicate potentially that maybe we don't have enough estrogen and maybe even progesterone in our cycle to build that healthy flow. In addition to that, if you have a lot of pain and discomfort, you need to take Advil or Tylenol, and your pain is, 7 to 10 out of 10, for 2 days. Again, this could be a sign that something else is going on. Maybe there's more inflammation. Maybe there's an underlying pre-existing condition that you might not know about, like endometritis, endometriosis, potentially fibroids or polyps that are happening. There could be really a variety of reasons why these symptoms are showing up. It's hard to really pinpoint and nail down exactly what one thing is based on one symptom. You kind of have to look at the holistic picture. But these are different reasons as to why you might be experiencing short, scanty flows or really heavy, clotty flows. Now let's move after week 1. We're going to move into week 2. Now, week 2 of the menstrual cycle, if you're really paying close enough attention, you'll probably find as a woman, this is when you feel your best. In week 2, when you're leading up to ovulation, right, your follicle stimulating hormone is rising and naturally your estrogen starts to rise. And when estrogen rises for women, this is going to create more plump looking skin. This is going to give us a lot more energy. It actually also decreases our appetite. I don't know if you noticed that maybe leading up to ovulation, you're not as hungry in this phase of the cycle. And in addition to that, as we're moving towards ovulation, and this is marked by rising estrogen, we're also going to notice some really cool fertile signs such as cervical mucus. And so cervical mucus is really important to look out for because this is a fertile sign that our body is telling us that our body is we're approaching ovulation. And so if you're not, so I'm trying to remember all your questions and try to answer them within each week. Yeah. And so if you're, I guess one sign that maybe you could look out for in that second week is maybe not having enough cervical mucus. This is a big one. So really making sure that you're checking for cervical mucus on your underwear while you're wiping. This is definitely something that is really important to look out for just for really understanding your menstrual cycle health. So then once we get to ovulation, that's kind of like that dividing point between the first phase and the second phase of our cycle. And so ovulation happens, right? The egg is released from the follicle, and then maybe it's fertilized by a sperm. And if it is, or if it isn't, regardless, we're all moving into our luteal phase. Now, the luteal phase is marked by rising progesterone. Naturally, after ovulation, your estrogen drops. Now, it does drop pretty significantly, which is why a lot of women also might feel a little bit kind of tired, a little bit more withdrawn, especially after they ovulate. And then at this point, progesterone starts to rise. Now, I think most of us in our luteal phase know that we can also experience, some discomforting symptoms like premenstrual symptoms. Now, the luteal phase is going to be different lengths for different women. And what we really want to look out for is just making sure that we have a healthy, robust, strong luteal phase. Because if you're trying to conceive, this is absolutely important for implantation. So ideally, we want a luteal phase. So from the time ovulation until the next period. Ideally, we want a minimum of a 10-day luteal phase, but usually it's anywhere between 12 to 14 days. And again, this will vary and differ from women to women. And then when we're in our luteal phase, rising progesterone is the key hormone. And this, again, is going to make us a little bit more withdrawn, a little bit more less social, a little bit more irritable, more hungry. And I think it's really important for women to honor that in the different phases of our cycle, we are going to have different symptoms. We are going to have different energy levels. And this is actually part of being a woman. I think once we can embrace and understand that we are cyclical beings and we are going through this hormonal ebb and flow from month to month, I think it can really help empower us to create our lives and serve us in a way that is going to be so much more beneficial because it can really teach us how to eat so that we can support our hormones. It can also help us figure out how to communicate or work in relationship with our partner and really be able to share with our partner what our needs are at different times in the cycle. You can also plan your social plans around your cycle. I also plan my work around my cycle as well. And so it's quite empowering once we do learn it and kind of get into the ebb and flow of it. But I know a lot of us can get quite frustrated and annoyed about our cycle and our period. But I really encourage women to kind of flip that and say, these are just different phases in our cycle that are teaching us how to serve ourselves better so that we can just be healthier and more hormonally balanced.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's funny. When I started out my business, I had a business partner, a female business partner, and we jokingly were finally like, we need to put our cycles on the calendar.
Yes.
this is hard, you know? So we totally did. And we would schedule our work around that, or like, okay, I know that this week isn't the good week to talk about her, the finances part of our business or whatever. And I would transfer that to my marriage as well, right? Because there are definitely different times where it is a good time to chat about things and a good time not to. The other thing that you mentioned was kind of like the mood and the fatigue and the hunger. And I just have to say here, and maybe we'll get into this today, but it wasn't until I was eating well and actually eating well, where I'm getting the right amount of protein, I have enough water, vitamin D is high, I've done all the things at a base level, that I could catch those things. Because I think a lot of the time, and what was happening with me is I was just eating whatever I was eating whenever I felt like eating it. And so I was having all these, weird symptoms, or like I was always fatigued, or that's actually not normal. And so, having like a good base of nutrition really lets you be able to see, like when I'm ovulating, for example, I can eat up to 200 grams of protein, right during ovulation. And then it's the same thing as I'm getting close to my period. It's like, wow, I am like ravenous and I need all this extra food. And it's because of the energy that goes into dropping an egg or, having your flow. And so I just think it's really interesting, kind of like a side note there. And maybe
Yeah.
that's, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say too, I know sometimes people can kind of get confused around this where it's like, well, I have these symptoms, but how do I know when the symptom is telling me that this is actually a red flag or that this is just a normal part of my menstrual cycle? So again, I think that the best way that I like to describe it is if it is disrupting your life in a way that, from cycle to cycle, you are having this major blow up with your partner or your friends or a family member, and you really can't regulate your emotions, and you find that your irritability is through the roof, that it's really disrupting your life. You're having cramps or terrible premenstrual migraines that you're having to take, you're having to medicate constantly. Those are more kind of signals and signs and red flags that there could be some sort of dysfunction or imbalance with your hormones throughout the cycle that needs to be addressed. But yes, I am ravenous too prior to my period. I'm also very active. I work out a lot. I have a husky. I'm walking my husky almost 2 hours a day. So we really have to be mindful of what our current lifestyle is, how active we are, and really use that to assess, okay, is this extra hunger just a part of, my hormones changing, or is there something else going on metabolically? So I like to say, like, is this disrupting your life and do you have to like medicate to get certain symptoms away, or is it just a natural shift in energy and hunger and mood that you can deal with and you can tolerate on a cycle to cycle basis?
Yeah, and kind of going on with that, one of the things we're going to talk about today is eating for both of those phases. And so I want to hear, it is the way that if these things are off, is the way that you tend to take care of them to do this through nutrition? Is it testing and hormones? Like, what does this look like for someone working with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'll start first with someone working with me. Usually, it's because they've been trying to conceive and they can't get pregnant. So, a lot of the time, for me, I don't like to. I don't like to guess. I like to test. As a functional fertility coach, in my practice, I utilize comprehensive hormone tests, comprehensive stool analysis, vaginal and uterine microbiome tests. I have a whole slew of functional tests that I offer to my clients to help them really dig deeper and look under the hood on what's going on that, conventional medicine is not able to provide for them. So that's number one. But always, like you said, I think you had mentioned this earlier, we have to start with the foundations. We have to start with the basics because, yes, we can do all these additional tests, but really at the end of the day, if you're not, it's actually quite simple. If you're not sleeping, if you're not hydrating, and if you're not fueling adequately, your body is going to be in disarray. And this is going to impact your hormones, which is going to impact your cycle and going to impact your mood, your energy, and ultimately your fertility. So I always say, as a holistic nutritionist, as we know, food is our fuel. Food can be somebody's medicine or can be somebody's poison. Even a healthy food can be somebody's poison, right? So we always start with the basics in food. First and foremost, I always say foundations first. What is on your plate and what is going into your mouth? So did you want to start first with what to eat for the first half of the cycle?
Yeah, let's talk about that follicular phase.
Okay. Well, before I dive into that, there's actually one piece that kind of is overarching for the entire cycle. And I want to talk about this first because this is, again, also one of the top foundations before we get into the little nuances. The first things first for a woman who is looking to support her menstrual cycle, her hormones, and her fertility is balance your blood sugar. This is so important. If you're doing long periods of fasting, if you are not adequately filling your plate with, the proper macronutrients, carb, protein, and fat, and you are not balancing your blood sugar, this is a recipe for hormonal havoc. So balancing the blood sugar, no matter where you are in your cycle, every single day is key. Top number one thing to do is balance your blood sugar. So the first thing that we should do always is just eat upon waking. Usually within 30 to 60 minutes is just eating a nice, robust breakfast. I'm sure this is not news to a lot of people, but if you are consuming caffeine or some sort of caffeine, whether that's coffee or tea or some sort of energy drink, never ever do this on an empty stomach, because this is going to kind of like kick your adrenal glands to ramp up the cortisol. This is going to drop your insulin. This is also going to suppress your appetite. So then you're not going to be hungry and you're not going to want to eat the fuel your body actually needs in that, that time of the day. So first things first is always wake up and eat a sufficient breakfast within 30 to 60 minutes of waking. And ideally, we want to get between anywhere, again, depending on your activity level, between 20 to 30 grams of protein first thing in the morning, whether that's a couple eggs and a little bit of cottage cheese or yogurt with, some fruit and toast and a little bit of avocado. We really want to make sure we are, building those strong foundations first thing in the morning. Now, once you set yourself with a nice breakfast, really, ideally, we want to be kind of eating or consuming something usually every 3 to 4 hours and not really going too long without eating, because then this is going to kind of signal unsafety for your body. This is going to ramp up your cortisol, and it's just a whole cascade of effects. If you're somebody who doesn't eat much during the day, you might notice, or you don't eat breakfast, you might notice you have a lot of cravings in the evening time. And this is going to be because you're not fueling adequately throughout the day. So first things first is just having that breakfast. And then every 3 to 4 hours, whether you are eating your next smaller meal or you're deciding to have a snack, that snack should always include some sort of fat or protein, whether it's banana and peanut butter, banana with a little handful of walnuts. If you want to do some chia pudding that's made with a little bit of protein powder with some berries on top. Nowadays, especially with social media and TikTok and Instagram, there's so many wonderful recipes out there and so many different meal ideas and different ways to make sure that we are supporting ourselves with healthy, robust meals. So yeah, just eating regularly throughout the day and making sure you're adding fat and protein to pretty much any snack or meal that you're having. So balance blood sugar. Doesn't matter where you are in the cycle, please, my friends, balance your blood sugar. So let's start with follicular. In the first phase, obviously, we are bleeding, right? We're losing blood. Our period is not just blood. It's tissue, it's mucus. There's a lot of other components to our menses. But there are key minerals that our body is losing while we bleed. One of these being iron, also magnesium. And it's really, really important to replenish those minerals during the bleed of the cycle to really support our health. So iron is a big one. As we know, we're losing blood, we're losing iron. It's really important to make sure that you are eating iron-rich foods during that time. Now, as well, it's in order for iron to be absorbed properly, it's really important to pair iron with vitamin C rich foods. So if we think about iron, okay, where does iron come from? Well, there's two types of iron, heme iron and non-heme iron. Heme iron is coming from the animal-based protein, right? So we think red meat is probably the top one that people can think about. But we're also getting iron from poultry, chicken. There's, red meat and poultry. So chicken, turkey, you can find iron is really rich in those foods. In addition to that, on the other side, you have non-heme iron, which is iron that comes from plant-based foods. And so plant-based iron-rich foods can look like beans and legumes. Those are big ones. Also, some dark leafy greens have some nice iron in them as well. You're not necessarily going to get as much iron as you would from the animal-based sources. But when we are eating these iron-rich foods, it's just nice to pair them with vitamin C-rich foods. So right away, we think vitamin C. All you have to think about is colorful produce. Colorful produce has lots of vitamin C. So if you want to make some sort of stewing beef with sauteed peppers that night, like when you're on your period, this is a really nice way to make sure that you're getting in those depleted nutrients. And one more piece here in that first week is that menses is actually an inflammatory process to the body. So, we know our tummy feels a little bit bloated. We have a little bit of cramps. And this is an inflammatory process. So another key nutrient or nutrients that I like to recommend during this time are turmeric and ginger. These are really nice to support the inflammatory process, I guess you can say. And so, I think a lot of the time we want to be cozy and be warm and, snuggled up in the bed or the couch when we have our period. So ginger turmeric tea is a really nice thing to sip on throughout the first few days of your bleed. And this will really support also maybe some of the mild cramping or back pain that you might have during this time.
Okay. Is there anything specific or what type of foods that you would recommend in regards to like egg health and hormone balance? Knowing that you deal with people that specifically have fertility issues, and this could be something that they're dealing with. Is it just kind of what you said, or is there anything specific based on their own testing or things that you guys do together?
So, sorry, you're talking about what to eat during the period or just in general?
In follicular phase.
In follicular phase. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a loaded question because when I work with someone, I'm always looking at their data. And then from there, I have to look at their menstrual cycle, have to look at their food diary, I look at so many other pieces to really understand. Sometimes people also do food sensitivity testing to see what foods are agreeing with them or not agreeing with them. But if we think about what we want to eat in the follicular phase for supporting egg health or maybe the developing follicle, that phase, we will also want to be eating foods that are really rich in antioxidants. So CoQ10, NAC, these are really good foods that are supportive for egg quality and egg health. Now, one other thing that I will say, in that follicular phase, when our body is rising estrogen, it's also really important to support our estrogen hormone in the follicular phase to eat more cruciferous vegetables during this time. So are you familiar with what cruciferous vegetables are?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. Cruciferous vegetables really are broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale. These types of foods have a certain compound in them called indole 3-carbinol and something called DIM. And these are really, really good for breaking down and metabolizing the estrogen that is rising quite high in your body in the follicular phase. So, when it comes to egg health, egg quality, hormone health, everything affects everything. So we really have to kind of look at it holistically. So when we think about eating foods that are going to support our estrogen production and our estrogen metabolism, this is also going to go hand in hand with supporting egg health and egg quality as well. So yes, I would say for sure what really focus on in follicular phase leading up to ovulation is those cruciferous vegetables and flax seeds. There's something else that I want to point out, but maybe we can talk about this at the end, which is seed cycling, because this is another really great way to support the health. Or do you want to, should I say one? Why don't I share seed cycling follicular phase right now?
Sure.
Okay. So with those cruciferous vegetables, that will support your estrogen and estrogen metabolism as your body leads to ovulation. But another thing that you can do is something called seed cycling. Seed cycling essentially is cycling 4 seeds throughout the entire menstrual cycle. So again, that first half of the menstrual cycle is marked by rising estrogen. So what do we take to support the rising estrogen and the metabolism? It is pumpkin seeds and ground flax seeds. So if you can take 2 tablespoons of each of those seeds, grind them up, throw them into a smoothie, put it on top of your granola or oatmeal, or you can put it on top of your yogurt, however you want to consume it. This is a really nice way to support your hormones as well. It's kind of a little bit easier, I find, because it can be a little bit overwhelming to figure out, oh my God, what do I eat this week? I have to make sure I'm getting in my heme iron foods. I need to make sure I'm having broccoli on this week. It can be a little bit much. So, don't put too much pressure on yourself to try and do everything. And if you want to start somewhere, I think a great place to start would be starting with seed cycling and just focusing on being consistent with, flax and pumpkin seeds in the follicular phase. And then I'm assuming we'll get to the luteal phase in a moment.
Yeah. Okay. And that was going to be my bridge. Yes. Let's talk about that luteal phase.
Okay, so as we then get into the luteal phase post-ovulation, again, we know kind of like the symptoms that are marked with rising progesterone. So one thing that we do know, again, is your metabolic rate or your metabolism increases in the luteal phase. So the reason why we are more hungry is because our body thinks, hey, we might be pregnant. And so what happens physiologically, if we think about it, our progesterone is rising. Naturally, what is that going to do? That's going to raise your basal body temperature. So if you're somebody who is tracking your BBT, you're going to notice that thermal shift in the luteal phase. And so when the basal body temperature increases, metabolically, our body is increasing as well. So we become more hungry because physiologically, our body thinks we might be pregnant. And so number one is just making sure, again, you're balancing that blood sugar and that you're getting adequate calories in that luteal phase. Now, the top 4 nutrients, well, vitamins and minerals that are really good for supporting progesterone production are magnesium, zinc, vitamin C, and B6. Vitamin V6. So these 4 specific, so 2 vitamins, 2 minerals are really, really, really important for making sure that we're consuming those in that luteal phase to support that developing progesterone. Now, a great way to do this is, again, to incorporate those seeds for the luteal phase. Now, I mentioned in the follicular phase, it was flax and pumpkin. In the luteal, it is sesame and sunflower seeds. So you just grind up those seeds, throw them into your smoothie or on top of your yogurt or granola, and you can consume them throughout the luteal phase. Otherwise, if we think about magnesium-rich foods, what is one thing that we crave a lot before a period? Chocolate. I'm just going to ask you exactly. Chocolate. Chocolate is high in magnesium. So there's like an actual reason why our body is craving this. B6 is another big one. B6 is really important for supporting and boosting that progesterone level. And B6 comes from poultry-rich foods such as chicken and turkey. Bananas is a great source of B6. Chickpeas is another great source of B6. So B6 is really important. And then we have zinc as well. Zinc is great for the entire is really great for, the entire cycle, but specifically for boosting that progesterone. And so oysters also, I don't know I don't like oysters, but some people love oysters. So oysters are really, really high in zinc. Also, different nuts and seeds are high in zinc as well. So stabilizing the blood sugar, doing some seed cycling, and then making sure you're getting in foods that are rich in B6, zinc, magnesium, and vitamin C.
Do you have any favorite go-to meals for the second half of your cycle then that are this is my staple for this time of the month?
I actually make these balls. So I have these power balls that I make because I call them my follicular phase power balls, my luteal phase power balls. And so what I do is I will, my luteal phase power balls really has, instead of putting the seeds in there, I'm putting the nut butter in. So what am I putting in there? Protein powder, oats. I'm putting in sunflower seed butter. I'm putting a little bit of turmeric in there as well. And I'm putting in some cacao nibs. And I make these kind of like energy balls and I keep them in the freezer. And then I kind of like pop 2 at each phase. That's how I do my seed cycling. I do them with my little energy balls. That's one of my favorite ways. But do I have any favorite meals per se? That's a great question. Nobody's asked me that specific question. For follicular phase, I do my stewing beef when I have my period. So that's my favorite one for follicular phase. I would say for luteal phase, for me, I just need to be really on top of making sure that I'm eating enough food, because if I don't eat enough food, it just all hell breaks loose. So I like to do like my, banana smoothies in the morning time with my protein powder. So I guess the banana has that extra B6 as well. So yeah, I'll have to think about that a little bit more.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, let's talk gut health and hormones, because you talk about how these two things go together. How are they connected?
Absolutely. So your gut, as you know, is pretty much the center of, where our body is able to absorb and assimilate the nutrients that from the foods that we're eating. So one of my favorite saying is you could be eating the healthiest diet in the world, but if your gut is compromised and you're not able to assimilate and absorb the nutrients, and also if you're not able to properly excrete the waste, what's the point? Not really what's the point, but you have to really make sure that the engine of the body, which is the GI tract, is operating at optimal capacity. So that's number one. Number 2 is we have a colony of bacteria that live inside the gut, and this is called the microbiome. And the microbiome, again, is made up of trillions of bacteria and cells that we are still just learning and understanding, about. So what I see in my practice, because I do a ton of comprehensive stool analysis, is that a lot of the times people have an imbalance of the good to bad bacteria that we have in the gut. Some people will have, especially, both female and male partners, high pathogenic bacteria that shouldn't necessarily be there, which is wreaking havoc, which is wreaking havoc on the gut. This can then lead to leaky gut. This can cause maybe small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. This can lead to, irregular bowel movements, whether that's constipation or diarrhea, intestinal bloating that doesn't go away. These are all different symptoms that there could be some sort of imbalance in the microbiome in the gut. Now, the important thing about this is when there is dysbiosis, is what it's called, this kind of imbalance to good bacteria in the gut, this is now going to kind of leave the terrain in your gastrointestinal tract compromised. And this can lead to more systemic inflammation in the body. And this can also lead to, this can lead to a whole slew of different symptoms. When we look at somebody's overall health, whether we're talking about fertility, whether we're talking about skin issues like eczema or psoriasis, whether we're talking about joint issues like rheumatoid arthritis, all of this can really stem from the gut. Where does it start? It starts from the gut. And so the gut health is really important to understand and look at. And one interesting piece here is that sometimes things are hanging out there completely asymptomatic. I see this a lot. Clients will come to me and say, I'm fine. I don't really I have regular bowel movements, poop 2 to 3 times a day. I don't really have too many gut issues, but I'm still not getting pregnant. And they decide to do a CSA, comprehensive stool analysis. And then we find whether it's an overgrowth of candida or some pathogenic bacteria that's hanging out and creating more inflammation, which can then impact egg quality. This can impact your hormones and a whole, just so many other areas of your health. So that's kind of, I want you to think about your gut as, again, if we're going back to foundations and we're thinking about what are the foundations with food, balance the blood sugar. And as well, when we're talking about our overall health, foundations is the gut. Is your body able to assimilate and absorb the foods that you're eating? And are you able to excrete the waste? Because if we're not excreting the waste and we're chronically constipated, we're recirculating toxins in the body. And a big, big part of estrogen metabolism happens in the liver and in the gut. We poop out our excess estrogen that our body no longer needs. So if we are, I see this a lot with endometriosis clients of mine. They definitely show a little bit more of gut imbalances than clients who don't have endometriosis. So there's a lot of different ways that we can kind of support and help and deal with the gut, and how that can also support hormone health and overall fertility.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So when women come to see you, is the stool analysis kind of like top of your list, even if moms are feeling fine and pooping regularly?
Right, exactly. Yes. I have 3 tests that are at the top of the list. The Dutch test, which is a dried urine test for comprehensive hormones, which is going to give us your entire hormone picture plus the metabolites, right? How your hormones are functioning in the body, plus how they're clearing, in addition to your entire adrenal profile. So we can see your cortisol level over 24 hours throughout the day. And then the second one is the comprehensive stool analysis. And this one, again, does a deep dive into the gut microbiome. And then the third top one is vaginal and uterine microbiome. Because when we're thinking about fertility and what's the environment where, that embryo is landing and implanting, it's the whole microbiome in the vagina and the uterus, which is going to impact whether or not someone can get pregnant, and then also hugely impact whether or not someone can stay pregnant. So
for the vaginal one, is that like a swab, and does it have to go through the cervix then?
The vaginal one is just a swab. The uterine microbiome is tested through menstrual blood collection.
Oh, okay. That's so interesting. I have not had that one
Yes.
done. I've had the other 2 done because I have my own stuff that I'm always curious about, but I haven't had that one. And that's super interesting. I want to test that just to see what mine is doing. That's so neat. Yeah.
Yes, it's so interesting. I have a lot of clients who come to me with chronic UTIs or also recurrent loss, but chronic UTIs is a big one, or recurrent bacterial vaginosis that they just cannot, for the life of them, treat with antibiotics. And so then this is a whole other conversation, but I'd love to just kind of drop this in for a quick moment if somebody's listening and dealing with this. When we take antibiotics, the antibiotics, whether or not this is for, your gut or your vaginal uterine microbiome, the antibiotics are wiping out all the bacteria. We wanted to wipe out the bad bacteria, but by consequence, it's also wiping out the good stuff. And so what happens if somebody has chronic antibiotic use over many years and they're not properly reseeding the good stuff, like the good microbes, then what can happen is that you're not creating. Think about your body as like an environment and an ecosystem, right? If we think about a forest and the ecosystem, the soil has to be really rich and nourished in order for plants and everything to grow. So if you're just wiping everything out and you're not reseeding that soil, this is not going to allow for, that healthy ecosystem to be there to allow for proper functioning of that particular organ ongoing. And in addition to that, one really funky, cool thing, this goes for gut and vaginal and uterine microbiome, is when we do see pathogenic bacteria that overgrows, the bad guys that we don't want there, they're really, really, really smart. And they found you as a host to try and live and survive. And so what do? They put down something called a biofilm. Have you heard of biofilm?
I have.
Yeah, biofilm is this like really sticky mucus-like substance that the bacteria will lay down so that they cannot get eradicated. So when you're taking antibiotics for, let's say, recurrent UTIs or bacterial vaginosis, if you're not stripping that biofilm first, and this also goes hand in hand with any gut pathogens that are overgrown, if we're not stripping the biofilm first and then going in for the kill, it sounds a little aggressive, but this is how we talk about it. Strip and kill. You got to strip the biofilm, then you got to go in for the kill. Then you have to reseed. So it's like a 3-phased approach. And most conventional treatment plans, what do? Just wipe and kill. And that's it. And so a lot of the times it doesn't kill everything because there's still some of the bacteria left stuck under some of that biofilm that they've protected themselves with. And so you'll just see these infections will just keep reoccurring over and over and over again and never truly get dealt with.
Yeah, it's interesting as you're talking about this. That's exactly how I feel, like you were saying about conventional medicine. Like you were talking about the soil and the roots and all this. And I'm like, we deal with the apple or the fruit at the end, or like this was the end product. And then we're like, wait, if something's not right about it, what can we do? And we work backwards the wrong direction instead of starting at the base, like you're talking about that soil or like how we make this foundation. So I love taking this approach because it can take years and a lot of confusion and medications and all kinds of stuff to do it the other way. So I think this is really important. So when you're talking about the gut and the biofilm and all this, it has me super curious. How do you wipe that? Like if you're saying that antibiotics can't even grab all of that, what does that mean to wipe it?
The really cool thing about the comprehensive stool analysis is that when they see an overgrowth of pathogenic bacteria, what ends up happening is from the test that I take is that it actually cultures it in a petri dish and it will put different remedies on it because there's a lot of different, oil of oregano, garlic, uva ursi, black walnut. There are so many different remedies that are when I work with my clients, I work with natural antimicrobials. I'm not working with antibiotics, but sometimes we do need those antibiotics specifically more for the BV, let's say. But if we're looking at the gut tests that I do will actually culture the pathogen in a petri dish, and then it will tell us which remedy is going to work best for it. Whether that's sometimes it's caprylic acid or ionic silver, and so what we'll do is I'll see what the best remedy is, and then from there we'll start with the phase 1, which is stripping of the biofilm. Then we'll go in for the kill with the appropriate remedy, and then we'll go in for the reseeding, and then we retest. And sometimes if somebody has if it's very, very high levels of overgrowth, then sometimes we might have to do 2 rounds of the kill. Or sometimes we can get it all from the first one. Now, when it comes to the UTIs and the BV, most of the time we do have to get antibiotics from the doctor. But I think for that one, a big missing piece in the conventional side of things is that they're not stripping that biofilm with whether it's boric acid or NAC is a good biofilm disruptor as well. Black cumin seed, there's so many different ones that you can use. And then understanding and knowing for how long to use it for prior, then immediately going in for the kill while continuing to strip the biofilm and then reseeding after. So for every individual, it's a case by case basis. Sure. I have a client who I'm working with now who has who had chronic UTIs for the last 20 years. And we finally did a vaginal microbiome for her. And she had high load BV, like 100% Gardnerella overgrowth, and she had no lactobacillus at all, zero. So we have to, she had to go on a high dose of antibiotics, which was not fun for her, but we did the process properly. We started with the boric acid for like 2-3 weeks before we even did the antibiotics. And then we did the boric acid alongside the oral and vaginal antibiotics. And now she's in the phase of reseeding. And so now we're going to do recolonization 4 weeks. Then we have to wait 2 weeks to be off the probiotics so that you can test again. So, and then see, okay, what does it look like now? So it is a process. It's not like take this for a week and everything's solved. If you want to do it the more functional, holistic way, it takes time. It can take sometimes a couple cycles or a couple months. It just all depends on the client's case or what the test looks like.
I mean, something like that, though, you have somebody who's been dealing with something for 20 years. When you're saying it takes time, this is someone, I assume she's been to the doctor over and over and taken all kinds of antibiotics. And so what's a couple weeks or months to try and really get to the bottom of the issue? This is what I love about functional medicine so much. So I'm really glad that you're talking about it today. Okay, so before we jump off, can you give us kind of a couple things that moms can take with them and put into implementation right now if they're trying to conceive or preparing for that?
Absolutely. So number one, first things first, and I mentioned this before, is stabilizing that blood sugar, waking up and eating that robust breakfast in the morning. That is number one. So stabilize the blood sugar throughout the day, audit your diet and see if that is something that you're doing. Number two, start seed cycling. I would say this is something pretty simple and easy. Again, don't worry about figuring out exactly what to eat in which phase of the cycle. If it feels a little bit overwhelming, just start with the seeds. Flax and pumpkin seeds in the follicular phase leading up to ovulation. And then in the luteal phase, this is sunflower and sesame seeds. The next two things that I would recommend to do, especially if you are thinking about having a baby in the relatively near future, is starting on a really robust quality prenatal vitamin, a prenatal and an antioxidant. These are really important. You might be eating a really healthy, clean diet when you're eating whole nutrient-dense foods, but a lot of the time, soil is depleted, and sometimes it can be hard for our bodies to actually take in the nutrients that the foods that we're eating have. So it's nice to just kind of top up with a nice, robust quality prenatal. So getting on a prenatal, and I would say try not to find one that is less than taking 3 a day. A 1-a-day prenatal in my mind is just, it's too little. It's not enough. And so start with a good quality prenatal and antioxidants. So antioxidant, whether that's CoQ10 or NAC. Those are two great antioxidant formulas that you can stack on top of the prenatal to continue to support your egg health, especially if you are 35 and above. And then lastly is, if you haven't already gotten it done, is definitely just start with basic blood labs, just basic blood labs to have a general understanding of what your vitamin D looks like, what your vitamin B12 looks like. I would do like a lipid panel to check your cholesterol levels, and you can do some cycle day 3 hormones, whether that's FSH, LH, estrogen, and prolactin. These are just general good places to start. But obviously you can go a lot deeper when it comes to testing, but it's nice to, if you haven't gotten any blood labs done, just go for a basic panel and start there. So balance the blood sugar, seed cycle, get a good prenatal and stack an antioxidant on that, and then start with basic blood labs. And with the basic blood labs, especially, I don't want to forget about this piece, because I think every conversation should include the man at some point. Get your partner's sperm tested. That's another huge one. Really, really important.
I was going to say too, and maybe you will agree with this, you let me know, but I have been to both like regular doctor for regular panel versus functional medicine and having somebody look over my stuff. It's very different. It can be the exact same blood test, and the person reading it makes a huge difference. So I've had, everything's in the normal ranges, and I'm like, what is going on with me year after year? And then I go to a functional medicine, everything's in the normal ranges. She's like, yeah, but do you see how this one's higher and this one's lower? So that means, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're making sense of my body. Thank you. So
exactly.
You have read it, could be big too. Be quick though, because you were talking about
CoQ10. Yeah.
CoQ10.
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 Yeah.
You're talking about CoQ10, and you mentioned, what was the other one? NAC. So
N-acetylcysteine and
right.
AC.
You had mentioned stacking those on top of a prenatal. Do you have because I know that they're going to have, when they go online to buy it or to a supplement store, they're going to have different milligrams of whatever. Is there like a base that it's safe for everybody to stack this?
Yeah, you can do 600 milligrams of NAC and anywhere to 200 to 400 milligrams of CoQ10 a day.
Okay, perfect. And they would just take that
Yep.
once a day.
Yep. You can do 200 milligrams of CoQ10 split into about 2 divided doses. So one CoQ10 in the morning, one in the afternoon, and then you just do one NAC. And these are, I mean, this is going to be, it's really good for your mitochondria, right? The mitochondria is that energy. Every cell has mitochondria in it. And so in order for the cell to divide, develop, and grow, it needs healthy mitochondria. And so that's what the antioxidants are for, to support that mitochondria. So I'm not trying to conceive, and I still take NAC and CoQ10 as well, just for, mitochondrial health. So absolutely, it's going to be good for your overall health, and it's going to also support egg and sperm quality as well. This would also be good for the male partner too.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, thank you, Nora. You were a wealth of information and it was a fun conversation. Before we jump off, where can listeners find you?
Absolutely. So you can find me, as you mentioned at the beginning, I have a podcast. That's usually a great place to start. It's called the Ultimate Pregnancy Prep Podcast. I also have a bunch of free guides where I teach you how to eat for your menstrual cycle, give you a whole bunch of recipes. I have a free supplement guide. I have a blood labs guide. All the things that I've been talking about, I have guides on all of these because so many people are looking for more information. So you can head over to my website at www.naturallynora, there's no H at the end of my name, naturallynora.ca. I am a fellow Canadian, so it's not .com.ca. And I don't know, maybe you'll put that in the show notes so it's easy for someone to find and click. And then I'm also on Instagram at naturally_Nora. And I give away a ton of free information on Instagram. I'm obsessed with like carousels and putting together all these fun little infographics. It makes me happy. So I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I've been on her social media. You will enjoy it. So go check it out. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nora. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Steph.
If you loved what you heard today, the very best way to support this podcast and help other moms to find it is to leave a quick review. I read one at the beginning of the episodes, and I would love for yours to be next. And if you're ready for even more pregnancy, birth, and postpartum goodness, come join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I will hold your hand and walk you through pregnancy and birth step by step so you're totally prepared for a birth you'll love. See you next week.